Now we're on Daf of Chesamid Bays, and Rava is trying to figure out how are we going to examine this duck to see if it's a treifa. Nishcheteva the nivtke. If we go ahead with the shchita and then we check it out, is dil makom nekam keshachit? Maybe exactly where inserts the knife for the incision of the shchita. That's exactly where there's a defect, and the duck is treif. So why don't we do it the other way around? Nivdike. First, we should examine it. V'hada nishchete. That's impossible. Why? Because our Omar Rabba says, Veshet ein lo bedika mibachutz ela mibifnim. There's no proper bedika for the Veshet. Right? The Veshet we said was the food pipe, the esophagus. And the only way you could do a bedika is mibifnim. Now, why is that so? Again, there's biology here. Rav is concerned about a drop of blood entering the perforation, right? It was perforated because the esophagus has two layers of skin. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I didn't take anatomy. And the outer layer is red. It's blood filled. And now you can't notice by doing an external inspection. The inner layer of the skin of the esophagus is white. So therefore, you can only have an effective investigation from the inside. So therefore, there's no way of doing the bedika before the shechita. Amalei Rav Yosef Brei. So Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, says to his father, I have a solution to your problem. Nivdike lekana, v'nishrete lekana, v'lichrei. Instead of playing around with the veshet, the esophagus, where any slight perforation would make it into a treifa, why don't we do the following? Let's check out the kana, and once we check out the kana, which we said was the windpipe, the trachea, which could be inspected from the outside, and do we find that most of it is split or most of it is still whole, and therefore we'll determine whether it's a treifa, and then we'll shecht it at the trachea. But you see explicitly that you could shecht the kana, which is Rav Nachman against Rav Ada Barav. V'hoda lefuchi leveshet levitik. Amar Rav Chachim Yosef Bereim b'treifas k'Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan was known as the expert in Hilchos treifas, and my son Yosef is on the same level as Rav Yochanan. Alma, we see clearly from this incident that Echad de Ka'amar Ohai Ohai. Take your choice. Either cut the veshet, which is the esophagus, or cut the kana, which is the trachea. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Achi Yishchot, Omer Rav Chizda, why does Rabbi Yehuda require that they shech the vridim? Lo, Omer Rabbi Yehuda will be oaf. Rabbi Yehuda is not worried about shchita. If it was shchita, it would apply to both an oaf and a behema. No, he's interested in getting rid of the dam. It has nothing to do with shchita per se. Hol vitzolehu kula kechet, since what we do is we take a bird and we roast the entire bird. I remember my mother used to do that on the rotary 65 years ago. Right? You don't have to worry about getting out the blood of a behema because basically they didn't take the entire behema and put it into into a rotisserie into what you call it, to roast it, but rather they cut it up into pieces and they were able to get the blood out. The time of the Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Dam, who, according to Rav Chiz's understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, the whole issue of cutting the vridim is only to get rid of the dam v'atanan. What are you going to do with that Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda? Omar Chi Yishchot es avridim. The word Yishchot means that the shechita itself requires cutting the vridim. Amos, so rather we're going to say Ad Yinkov es havridim umay Ad Yishchor Ad Yinkov b'shas shchita. So the words Ad Yishchor are not referring to the actual shchita, because from our purposes, you could puncture these jugular arteries, and that's fine. You don't have to do shchita on freedom eating according to Rabbi Yehuda. But what you want to do is, in order to get out the dam, you want to do this nikuv and puncture the freedom at the time of the shchita, because after the shchita, it's going to cool off, and then it's going to be hard to drain out the blood. Toshma, we learned in a brisa against Rav Chizda, the reading the shchita divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda requires reading for the shchita. It's not just to get rid of the dam. So the Gemara answers, Ema, we have to reinterpret the brisa of reading tzarech lenakvam b'shas shchita divrei Rabbi Yehuda. The same answer that we gave before. Toshma, another brisa against Rav Chizda. Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda, the Chacham said to Rabbi Yehuda, me'acher shelo huzkiru v'ridim el hotzi ben adam mali b'shchita, mali shelo b'shchita. In other words, the Chacham is saying to Rabbi Yehuda, why do you care about shchita? Why are you telling me that in shchita you have to cut the vridim? The only reason why I would cut the vridim is to get rid of the dam. Michlal, so what do we see? The Rabbi Yehuda saw b'shchita. That the Rabbanan, by accusing Rabbi Yehuda of changing the laws of shchita, right, changing the rules of the game, Rabbi Yehuda apparently required freedom as part of the shchita. If it was part of getting rid of the dam, even the Chacham would agree that you got to sever the freedom to get out the dam. So Gemara rejects it. It says, "Ha, hachi kamalei." This is what the bar plukta of Rabbi Yehuda meant to say, Mali l'nokvan b'shas shchita, Mali l'nokvan shelo b'shas shchita. Enochinami, you, Rabbi Yehuda, require that we sever the vridim only because of getting out the dam. But why do you make a big deal that you have to get rid of the vridim and sever them at the time of the shchita? If you want to get rid of the dam, get rid of the dam an hour later. But who suffer? Why does Rabbi Yehuda require that you get rid of, slice the freedom and get rid of the dam dafka b'shas shchita? B'shas shchita asi dam dechayim. Chayim means it's warm and it's easy to drain out the blood. But shalom b'shas shchita, the animal cools off, so to speak. Lo asi dam dekarir. It's gonna be a heck of a. You're gonna have a heck of a time to get the dam out because it's already cold. Now, once the meat of the animal becomes cold, it becomes congealed, and after it congeals, it's very difficult to get out the dam. You might have to roast it over an open fire. Like we do with a kavod, with a liver. Anyway, boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah. Vridim Rabbi Yehuda Shah Behen Dars Behen Ma'u. Somehow, Rabbi Yirmiyah didn't know about this whole discussion that we had, the conclusion of which is that Rabbi Yehuda only requires Shchitas HaFridim Shashchita in order to get rid of the dam. He thought that maybe Rabbi Yehuda applied the laws of Shchita even to the Vridim. And if that be the case, then we have a psul called Doras, and we have a psul called Shah. Some elderly gentleman said to Rabbi Yehuda, Hachi Omer Rabbi Lazar. The Amilel say Omer Lehu Sabel Rabbi Lazar. Hachi Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Benakvan bekotes ve'im ksherim. You don't have to shech the vridim. You don't even need a knife to get rid of the vridim. Just pierce them and get the dam out of there. So what are you telling me about a psul of Doras or Shah? There's no psul of shchita here. There's no shchita at all. Tanya Kavosid Rav Chizda, and now we're going to support Rav Chizda's understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, that the whole issue here is getting out the dam. It's not halach of shchita. Shachat shnei chatzoi simanim b'of. The Mishnah says that if you cut only half of each simon in an oath, and you don't cut rove of the simon, is possible. And how much more so in the case of a behema where you require 2 simanim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer B'of. Ad sheyishchor es haveshet v'es havridim. Wait, so how does that support Rav Chizda? It's only a question of dam. Just 1 second. I get it. You see, the Brisa opens up with the following words. It's very easy to miss this. Shachat shnei chatzoi simonim ba'of. So this whole story of Rabbi Yehuda Sheyishchor as Haveshet im Havridim, that's only an oaf. Otherwise, why did you mention oaf? You should have said in Behema as well. And the answer is because Behema is not roasted whole, and therefore there's no problem in draining out the blood, because it's cut up into segments. By contrast, in the case of oaf, where they roast the oaf as one whole, it's going to be very difficult to drain the blood unless you cut the vridim immediately at the time of the shechita. And this supports the interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda of Rav Chizda. Okay, now Rabbosai, we have a machlokes between Rav and Rav Kahana, which boggles my mind. According to our Mishnah, the way I read it, and I hope you read it the same way, if you shecht half of the simon garnished, it's possible. And yet, my Rav Omar, to my absolute shock, mechza mechza karov. If he shechts half the simon, it's as if he shechted most of the simon. In other words, the psul is only chal if more than rov was not shechted. But if half of the simon was shechted, then it's kosher. Really ployim, it's like against the Mishnah, but the Gemara is going to square it off with the Mishnah. Rav Kahana or mechza mechza eino karov. Half is not rov. With all due respect to 50%, it's not 50% plus my 0.001. Rav Omer Mechsal Mechzikarov Hachi Omer Achmar Moshe. Right, all the laws of Shechita were given to Moshe Rabbeinu orally at Sinai, and what did Hashem say to Moshe? Lo Tishayir Ruba. Don't leave out rov of the Simon, meaning as long as you get half of it and you didn't leave rov out, it's kosher. Rav Kahana Omer Mechsal Mechzikarov. Hachi Amalei Rachmano Moshe. What did the Almighty say to Moshe at Har Sinai? Shchot Ruba, shecht most of the pipe. So what? Notice there are two versions of what Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. How the heck does anybody know it? Why they had a recorder there? I don't know. But anyway, one way is to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Hashem what would be possible in the negative. And the other way is to say Hashem told Moshe what has to be done in the positive. According to the first version, which is Rav, Hashem said to Moshe, don't miss out on rov of the simon. It'll be possible. Implying that half of the simon is kosher. According to Rav Kahana, on the other hand, Hashem said to Moshe, make sure that you shecht most of the simon. Now the pella to me here is that nobody speaks about this. Like this, like, to me, is like a major sugya, whether half is like rov. And we go on. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah. This is our Mishnah. Chatzi, okay, how do we square off Rav with our Mishnah? Mishnah says that if it's Chatzi, it's possible. Chatzi, echad ba'ove, echad v'chatzi b'beima, because beima requires 2 simonim, and he only got in one of the 2 simon and a half, shchitas psula, iyarbet mechzav mechzikarov. According to you, Rav, all he has to do is shecht half the simon. Is a my puzzle. Why should this case be puzzle when he shechted half the simon? Ha'avid le'rov. It's considered like he shechted his rov because Rav equates mechza with rov, which I can't figure out for the life of me why. And the Gemara answers, what we're talking about is that the Rabbanan are going to passel half the sima, a shchit of half the sima, even though the Torah, according to Rav, was machshirid, because they're afraid, the Rabbanan were afraid that maybe he won't even shecht half the sima. Rav Katina, Tashma, What are you going to do with the price? It says chilko l'shnayim. So now we're talking about a tanur, an oven that was makabel tuma, and it's made of earthenware. It's a kli cheres. And the Torah says about kli cheres a couple of very interesting, unique things. Number one, you remember that it's matamim the avir, like you're holding a puppet, but the puppet is a sheretz. And then we said that in the case of a kli cheres, if it becomes tomei, you have to destroy it. And he split it in this case into two pieces. I guess from the perspective of the owner of the oven, it's a lot better and easier to split it into two than to break it into small pieces and have to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Ve'ain shovin. Now I'm not sure why, but it's very important that when he splits the oven, it's got to be split into two equal halves. Now let's just figure this out. If it's split into two halves, then according to Rav, who holds that mechza is like rov, so yet here he says shneim tmeim. Because we can't be exact about it, but implying that if it was possible to be precise in dividing up the oven, then tahorim. Am I tahorim? How can it be tahorim according to Rav? Zil hacha ikaruba, zil hacha ikaruba. Imagine we're going to take Rav to the extreme, to the logical extreme. We're going to say that you split something in half, each half is considered like rov, which is logically impossible. Each half of the divided oven is regarded as a majority piece. Now again, in order to remove the tuma of kli cheres, you have to break it in a way that you don't have most of the piece. And according to Rav, if you split it down the middle, if efshel etzamtzem, then you have rov. So you didn't split it into a fragment of less than rov. Papa trey ruby b'chad bonaleka. In other words, there's a limit to how far you can take Rav. You can't have two greater parts, two rovs, in one kli. It's impossible. It's logically, it's a self-contradiction. In the case of shechita, you can apply the principle of rov to half, according to Rav, because when he does half the simon, it's as if he shechted most of the simon. There's no inner contradiction in the logic of applying Rav's principle in the case of shechita, but in the case of shviras or netitzas kli cheres, what are you going to tell me that there are two robes over here? That's impossible. Okay, we'll finish up now. Toshma shachet chatzi gogers v'shaba kidei shchita cheres ugmara shchita sekshera. How is that possible? If Rav is correct, is itarfale. The animal is already a treifa because already more than half has been shechted, even though only half was successful. So I don't know. I always thought treifa depends upon the reality of whether the animal is going to live and survive or not. But the Gemara somehow assumes that if the majority of, let's say, the kana is severe, the animal is considered a treifa. I was hoping he would add something here because I mean there's no reality here over here because I mean Rav is saying al pidin there's a chal shem rove through mechza, but he's not saying that the animal is going to drop dead. I don't know. Me savis with behema. How do you know the Bryce is talking about a behema? Lo ba'of. It's talking about a bird, and therefore the shechita is kshera. Why? Mimanavsha. I mechzal mechzike rove. Okay, so he shechted rove of one simon. Let's say the kana, for example, and it's kosher. I mechzal mechzeinika rove. Lo avad velo klum. Right? If it's not like rove, then when he shechted half of the kana, it doesn't become a treifa. Right? Because there's no treifus in the kana unless it's the greater part of the kana that was defected, that was cut. So therefore, the shochet could complete the shechita of the oaf, and all he has to do is make a slight cut in the kana, and the bird is thereby muter b'achila. So the machlok between Rav and Rav Kahana is not relevant to this brisa because this brisa is talking about an oaf. Okay, then this is where we'll stop for today. Thank you very much and have a great day. Tomorrow is Thursday, correct? So we meet again at noon. Mitzvah Shem.